Alright, this is video 2 of our fidget spinner fun. So now we have our basic shape that we're starting out with, just a square that you guys made the last time, so that was from video 1. And so now we're going to add a little bit more to it. As you guys know, a fidget spinner is much more than just a block. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is our hole that is going to be directly in the middle. So this is where the bearing is going to go. So the first thing you're going to want to do is click directly on this face, and it's going to highlight nice and blue for you. That means you're in that sketch. You can see how it kind of highlights over here as soon as I click it. You can see that this Boss Extrude piece is what I'm editing now. So what we want to do is our bearing is a perfect circle. So we're going to go to here to circle, click on circle, and we're going to do that same snap feature that we used last time. So you can see my mouse has a little pencil. I have the circle down below it, so I know I have the right tool. And if you hover over the origin here, you're going to get that yellow mark right there. And that's exactly what we want. So I'll do that one more time. So I have my pencil with my circle. I'm going to hover over this, and it's going to snap, give me the go-ahead sign, and we're going to draw our circle. So that's step 1. Remember, we always have 3 parts to doing things in SolidWorks. We're going to create a sketch, we're going to add dimensions to it, and then we're either going to cut or extrude that piece. So we have our sketch created. Our next step is to go into here into Smart Dimensions, and we're going to click on the perimeter of that circle and click off, and it's going to allow us to modify that distance. So what we want here is 22.4 millimeters, and you can type all that just directly into the box, 22.4 millimeters, hit the check mark, and it's going to size it for us. So now I have a bearing hole, a pretty good sized bearing hole right there, with a dimension. So sketch completed, Smart Dimension completed, sorry, with space in there for a second. And now we just need to cut or extrude that piece. So I still have my Smart Dimension selected, so I'm just going to hit Escape, and we're going to go to Features here. So with Features, last time we used the Extruded Boss base, and now we're going to do something called the Extruded Cut. So I still have my piece selected, and I'm going to click Extruded Cut, and what this is going to do is whenever we extrude something, that's adding material, and whenever we cut something, that's removing material. So we want to make sure that this cut goes all the way through. We can see how it's kind of lined up over here. And so right now it's called a blind cut. So a blind cut goes up to a certain point, whichever face that you want it to. What we want is through all. So we want to make sure that this hole punches all the way through our fidget spinner. We wouldn't want just part of the bearing exposed because you have to put your thumb and one of your other fingers, your pointer fingers, on the other side. So we want to make sure it goes through everything that we're cutting here. So I have that selected. I have through all selected here, and I'm going to hit the check mark, and that's our final piece. So now we have our bearing hole cut into our fidget spinner. So that was step 2. Now if you guys have really cool fidget spinners, like many of you guys do, I know, you will notice that there are also some weights around the other side. So the weights that we're going to use are actually, for this design, just a common hex nut. So it's kind of a 5-sided figure that adds some weight to your spinner that'll make it spin a little more smoothly. So if we click on the left, right here on the plane, we get it highlighted again. We're going to start by adding a sketch. So I got to go back to my sketch. And we're using this polygon. So this polygon is a 6-sided figure, just like our hex nut. So we're going to click on our polygon. And again, this is kind of a cool feature of SolidWorks, but if you hover your mouse over, you'll see that I have the circle under my pencil, so I know I have the right piece again. If you hover over the origin right here and you get that snap tool, it's going to allow you to align it with the origin. So you see how I have that kind of black line just to the right of my pencil? That means it's directly in the middle of that circle and directly in the middle of where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and left click once, and you can drag out this hexagon. Again, it doesn't really matter where it goes. You can see you can kind of spin where it is, but we're going to align it later. So actually I'm going to put it a little off center. Not quite what we want. Okay. So I still have my hexagon selected, so I'm going to go ahead and hit escape. And now that we have a sketch created, we need to add a dimension. So I'm going to go to Smart Dimension. This one's going to be a little different. So we're going to do 2 clicks on this one. So I have my Smart Dimension here. And what you want to do is that they measure hex nuts by how long they are, so what their diameter is. So you can actually do a Smart Dimension for a diameter. So if I was just to click once here, that's going to give me the length of that side. But I don't want the length of that side. I actually want the length or the diameter of the whole hex nut. So I'm going to click right here, and you can see that my dimension changed. And now it's telling me how long or how far across that is. So I'm going to click one more time off, not clicking any of the lines. And I'm going to put 9. And if you put backspace, that little slash, not backspace, I apologize, that backslash, that means divide. So I'm going to do 9/16, and we're going to do inches on this one. So make sure you do inches on this one. This is a little different than what we've done before. Everything else we've done is metric. So we're changing it up just a little bit. We're going to do 9/16 inches, and it's going to populate that spot for us. I still have my Smart Dimension highlighted, so I'm going to exit off that, and now I have my dimension. So now I have my polygon right there on the front. But you can see it's a little wonky. We don't really like that. So we want this to be aligned perfectly. So if you click one of the edges here, you can actually add what we call a relation. So over here to the left, you can add a horizontal, vertical, or fix that position. We're going to do a horizontal relation, and as soon as I click that, you can see that it lined it up with my bearing. So now we got a perfect bearing, and it's lined up perfectly parallel with our hole because we want to make sure that it's the same distance away. So we got a good spot here. We're kind of right in the middle, so my circle is right in the middle, and then our polygon's kind of right in the middle of this space as well. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So now what we have to do is recreate that because your fidget spinner is perfectly symmetrical. So anytime we have to do symmetry, SolidWorks has a program or a feature where you can actually reflect things across an axis. So we're going to be doing that, and I will warn you, this part is a little tricky. So make sure that you're paying attention to this part. But I'm going to go ahead and check mark that our line is there. We're pretty happy with that. And we're going to add what we call a center line here. So if you click on this little chevron and go to center line, it's going to allow me to draw a line, and it's going to be like this dashed kind of line here. So now we have this dashed line. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. So I'm going to left click, and I dragged and I highlighted this hex nut that we added. I have everything highlighted in there. You can see that all of those pieces are selected. Selected entities is just like the things that have been selected. And so what we're going to want to do now is go to this button. It's called Mirror Entities. So Mirror Entities is exactly like what it sounds. So it's going to reflect something across an axis and duplicate that on the other side. So it's perfectly symmetrical. If I was to just come in here and drop another polygon up here, it would be really, really challenging for me to make sure that the distance, if we look at this completed one, the distance from the perimeter of this circle to the edge of this hex nut is the same if I was just to randomly drop it up here. So by using the Mirror Entities tool and reflecting this piece over, we make sure that our fidget spinner is perfectly symmetrical. So I have my center line, I have my hex nut created with a dimension. Now we're going to click this Mirror Entities button. So you can still see my entities to mirror. All of those pieces are still selected. If I go right here where it says Mirror About, I want to reflect it over this line. Oops, didn't like that. Let's get rid of arc and see if that helps. Yep. So when you guys are checking your entities to mirror, you'll notice that mine said arc as well. So the arc is this circle right in the middle. We don't want that selected. So before you reflect your piece, you want to make sure that your entities to mirror only say line 1 through 6. So I have line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you have this arc piece, okay, it says arc 1 here. That will not reflect properly. So what we're going to want to do is just click on arc 1 and just hit the delete button, and it's going to unselect that for us, and that's exactly what we want. So now we have all of our lines selected. We're going to click this mirror about box. It's going to highlight blue so that way we know we're on it. And you're going to click that line, that center line that we drew. So this center line actually isn't going to show up in our design. It's just used for drafting, and we only use it to reflect this piece over. So don't worry about this line showing up later. You're not going to have this weird stringy piece of plastic coming off your fidget spinner. But now that we've reflected that, we'll just hit OK. And you'll see we have two perfectly spaced hex nuts that are the same distance from that middle circle bearing. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So we've created our sketch, we have our dimension on here, and then we just reflected this across the axis. So we actually don't need to add a dimension to this because our dimension's down here. This is exactly the same. So if I was actually to change this, let's make it really big so you guys can see. If I was to change that to 20, you can see that it actually changed my reflected piece as well. So I can make this 50, whatever the case may be, and it'll change with whatever I mirrored. So it's kind of nice if you mirror things that they all change proportionally and congruent with one another. But I'm just going to change this one back to our measurement, which was 9/16. So 9 divided by 16 inches. And it's going to give us this piece. So now we have our sketch, we have our dimension. We're going to go into features and we're going to do an extruded cut. So this is the same feature we used last time to cut that hole for our bearing. So if you just do the extruded cut, you're going to go through all, and you're going to notice that you can see this yellow part. You can always check your work to make sure you're doing it properly. But this yellow is the projected cut, so that's where it's going to cut to. So we went through all, we're going to hit the check mark because we like what we've done, and now we're going to have these two hex nut holes for our weights, and now we have a center bearing hole as well. But these are perfectly equidistant. So those are the main steps. There's still like some design pieces that we will talk about in our next video. But if you look at this, we have kind of all of this extra chunky stuff, and our fidget spinner doesn't look very cool if you ask me. It's just kind of a square and it's not very fun. It'd be really chunky in your hand, really hard to spin, so a square isn't what we're going to end up with. But in the next video, I'm going to show you some design pieces on how you can kind of remove some of this material, and it'll help you kind of add your own touch, your own flair to your fidget spinner. So by cutting away that material, you get to make it uniquely your own, so it's not just this generic kind of square shape. And so once you're at this step, go ahead and raise your hand, check in with Mr. K, and make sure that you have everything that you needed to complete from this video before moving on to that next one. Perfect. But that's it. All done. Great job. Just make sure you check in with Mr. K before heading to that next and third final video.